What if I told you that the names you see all over Veneto, from Venice to Padua, to the surname on your neighbor's door, are all echoes of a single ancient tribe and the heroes of the Trojan War? It sounds like a myth, right? But it's a story rooted in thousands of years of history. The names that define this corner of Italy aren't just random labels. They're living fossils, fragments of language, and whispers of epic journeys, ancient empires, and the humble lives of everyday people. In the next few minutes, we're going to journey back 3,000 years to uncover the true origin of Veneto's names. You'll discover that history isn't just in books. It's written on the street signs and in the phone books all around you. And by the end, you'll never look at a name like Zentin or the city of Padua in the same way again. Our story begins around the 9th century BC, long before Rome was anything more than a cluster of huts. A distinct Indo-European people arrived in the fertile plains of northeastern Italy. History knows them as the Veneti. These weren't Gauls and they weren't Etruscans. They were a unique culture with their own language, gods, and a legendary origin story that would make Homer proud. Ancient historians, including the great Padua-born Livy, linked the Veneti to the fall of Troy. The legend says that after Troy was sacked, a Trojan prince named Antenor, a wise counselor who had advised returning Helen to the Greeks, led a group of survivors from the region called Paphlagonia. After wandering the seas, they landed on the Adriatic coast, defeated the local tribes, and established a new home. According to Virgil's Aeneid, Antenor himself founded the city of Padua, giving Veneto a foundational myth that tied its origins directly to the epic heroes of antiquity. Now, while the Trojan connection is more legend than literal history, the people themselves were very real. They were skilled horse breeders, so famous that their horses were sought after even in Greece. They controlled lucrative trade routes like the vital amber route from the Baltic Sea, and most importantly, they gave the entire region its name. The land became Veneto, the home of the Veneti. The very name Venice or Venezia is a direct echo of this ancient tribe. The etymology of Veneti itself is still debated, but one cool theory traces it to the Proto-Indo-European root ven, meaning to desire or to love. This suggests that the Veneti may have been seen as the beloved people or the friendly ones. For centuries, the Veneti thrived. They were also steadfast allies of a rising power to their south, Rome. They fought alongside the Romans against the Gauls, and over time were peacefully integrated into the Roman world. By 49 BC, the people of Venetia were granted full Roman citizenship. The Romans did what they always did. They brought order, infrastructure, and their language, Latin. They built roads that still define the landscape, like the Via Postumia and the Via Annia, connecting key cities. They respected the Veneti culture, but also left their own indelible mark. Major Venetic settlements were given Latin names. The ancient center of Este, for example, became the Roman colony of Ateste. New towns sprang up, often named after Roman families or military garrisons. The Romanization of Veneto had begun, layering a new set of names on top of an ancient foundation. Of course, Roman stability couldn't last forever. Its decline brought centuries of chaos. Waves of invasion swept across Italy, and Veneto, as a gateway to the peninsula, was hit especially hard. First came the Visigoths, then the devastating Huns under Attila, who sacked major cities like Aquileia and Padua. Later, the Germanic Lombards established their own kingdom in northern Italy. This constant turmoil had a huge effect on the population. Many people from the Roman cities on the mainland fled destruction, seeking refuge in the safest place they could find, the marshy, inaccessible islands of the coastal lagoon. It was here, in these scattered, waterlogged settlements, that the seeds of a new city were planted. For hundreds of years after Rome's fall, the world was smaller, more local. Most people were known by a single given name, Marco, Giovanni, Elena. But as populations began to recover and grow, especially after the year 1000, a problem emerged. In a village with a dozen men named Pietro, how could you tell them apart? A solution was needed, and it wasn't a formal decree, but a natural, organic process. the birth of the surname. People started adding a second name, a descriptive qualifier, to distinguish one Pietro from another. This wasn't a formal hereditary surname yet, but a nickname, a soprannome. And the way these names were formed tells us a fascinating story about medieval life in Veneto. The nicknames that eventually became the fixed hereditary surnames we know today generally came from four main sources. Understanding them is like learning to read a secret code in the names embedded all around you. First, and probably the most common, were names based on a place of origin. If a man named Antonio moved from Padua to Venice, his new neighbors might call him Antonio Padoan, meaning Antonio from Padua. This was incredibly common and gives us some of the most quintessentially Veneto names. A person from Vicenza became Byzantine. Someone from Treviso was a Trevisan. A family from the Friuli region was known as Furlan. These names are basically a map of medieval migration, telling you where a family's ancestors came from centuries ago. The second big category is occupation. What did you do for a living? That was your identity. In a world of specialized crafts, this was a perfect way to tell people apart. The man who worked with iron was called Ferraro, one of the most common surnames in Italy. The local baker was a fornero, the tailor sartor or sartori. In a region so dependent on wood for building boats and houses, the carpenter or marangon was a vital figure, and his trade became a common surname. The guy who made barrels, a botero, also lent his profession to his descendants. These names paint a vivid picture of the medieval economy, a world of blacksmiths, barbers, barbieri, and lumberers, boscolo. Third, people were named for their personal characteristics. These were nicknames in the truest sense, often based on looks or personality. The most common surname in all of Italy, Rossi, just means red, and likely referred to an ancestor with red hair. A short man might be named Basso, a stout one, Grasso. A man with a limp could be called Zanca, which means lame. Even being left-handed could give you a name like Manchin. These names are like intimate little portraits, giving us a glimpse of what our ancestors actually look like. Finally, we have the patronymics, names derived from the father's name. This is a classic naming tradition all over the world. In Veneto, this often took the form of son of. A man named Luca might have been known as De Luca. The family of Bernardo, which became Bernardi, distinctly Venetian form, uses the suffix atto, which implies a family or clan. So the family Simone became Simeonato, and the family of Marco became Marcato. And here's a great language hack. In the Venetian dialect, the name Giovanni was often shortened to Zan. This gives us a whole family of famous Veneto surnames, Zanetti, Zanon, Zampieri, all of which ultimately mean son of John. If you're finding this journey into history of names as fascinating as I do, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next exploration into the past. Learning where we come from helps us understand who we are. As the Middle Ages gave way to the Renaissance, Venice grew from a city of refugees into the master of a vast maritime empire. The Republic of Venice, the Serenissima, was a global superpower, and its influence stretched across the Mediterranean and beyond. This global reach brought a new wave of diversity to Veneto, which of course was reflected in its names. Venice's trade and military outposts in the eastern Mediterranean meant constant contact with Greek-speaking cultures. It wasn't uncommon for Venetian families to have names reflecting connections to places like Crete, which was a Venetian colony. Even more pronounced was the influence from the east, from the Slavic-speaking peoples of Dalmatia and the Balkans. The name Schiavone or Schiavone, found all over Veneto, literally means Slav. It points to an ancestor who came from those coastal lands, maybe as a trader, a soldier, or an immigrant drawn to the wealth of Venice. The structure of Venetian society also created its own unique naming conventions. The Republic was ruled by a powerful aristocracy, a closed class of noble families whose names were inscribed in the famous Golden Book. Names like Contarini, Lordan, Motingo, and Barberingo became synonymous with power and wealth for centuries. Though many of these great families have since died out, their names are etched into the palaces and the history of Venice forever. The linguistic creativity of the Venetian dialect also gave some unique words to the world. The term ghetto originated in Venice from the name of the area near a foundry or ghetto, where the city's Jewish population was compelled to live. And the word contraband comes from Venetian contrabbando, meaning against the proclamation, referring to smuggled goods. These words are a testament to the commercial and social power of a city whose language shaped the world. So the next time you walk through a Venetian calle, meet someone with a classic Veneto name, or just look at a map of the region. Remember, you're not just hearing a name, you're hearing a story that's thousands of years old. You're hearing the echo of the ancient Veneti tribe and the mythical Trojan founder. You're seeing the organizational footprint of the Roman Empire. You're listening to the story of a medieval craftsman and the location of his ancestral village, or even the color of his hair. And you're feeling the global influence of a maritime republic that once ruled the seas. The names are the history, hidden in plain sight. What is the origin of your surname? Or is there a place name in Veneto that you've always wondered about? Share it in the comments below. I'd love to read your stories.